Rev up your engines! Today I'm going to talk about a radical new motor oil that's very important for people that have cars with the modern engines in them. The new oil is going to be called GF6, and it's really important for people with those GDI, variable valve timing engines that a lot of modern cars have, the little 4-cylinder engines that put out as much horsepower as a V8. Take the Hondas. They've had a problem with oil dilution, where gasoline was getting past the piston rings, past the lubrication, and diluting the engine oil, which leads to engine damage. And other GDI engines have had carbon buildup, timing chain problems where the timing chains wear out prematurely. Well, that's what this GF6 oil is made for. You can't buy it yet, unless of course you're watching this video in the future. This new GF6 oil isn't going to be out in the marketplace until May 1st, 2020. Make sure you look at the label on a can of oil, because the label explains it all. As you can see on my bottle of Castrol here that I use in this old car, you go by the service label. This says API service SN, SM, SL, and SJ. How the quality of the oil fits your engine. And you want to research your own engine to see what you're supposed to use. Now, as I said, it's not going to be until May 1st, 2020 that you're going to be able to buy the new GF rated oil. You can see here, it's not going to look like the old one. It's going to look like this new one. It's a different shield. 0W16. It's specially for the modern engines. And they're going to have two types, GF6A and GF6B. And here's the difference between those two. The GF6A is going to be backwards compatible, so you can use it for any vehicle. That's what they're going to say you should really run your cars on, so they pollute less, have less engine wears. That'll be the GF6A. And the GF6B, that's going to be only for those modern engines that need the 0W16 oil, which in itself is hard enough to find these days, because that is a relatively new oil, and a lot of stores don't even sell the stuff. Now, this new GF6 oil has to meet 8 new parameters that the old oil didn't meet. The first one, sequence 3H, requires that the oil be 33% better, stopping oxidation and deposits in the engine. This is especially for those GDI engines that build up deposits more. Then it has to meet sequence 4B, which means it has to have improved valve train wear so the valves and the cams and everything don't wear out too early. And it has to meet sequence 5, reduces varnish and sludge inside the engine. Now, this is very important, and of course it's historically important too. On the early engines, they just used oil they had lying around, and after it got dirty, it would build sludge in the engine to destroy it. So then later they came with detergent oils. The detergent oils contain detergent, which keeps all the sludge in suspension. So rather than clog stuff up, it gets in the oil and floats around, and then when you change the dirty oil, the sludge goes out with the dirty oil. This is just a further improvement of it to keep sludge and varnish from building up. Varnish is the real big problem in these GDI engines. They have a tendency of running hotter with all that pressure and turbochargers throwing stuff in, so it has to meet that specification. Then the new GF6 oil has to meet fuel requirements so that they get better fuel economy. It requires 19 to 39% better fuel economy. The less viscosity, the less friction it is. That's why they've gone to 0W16. Sequence 6F, which is another fuel economy thing. It requires that these oils meet a certain minimum fuel economy in a test. Then there's sequence 8, another test, that requires that these oils do less corrosion, that they keep more corrosion from occurring inside the engine. Then there's a sequence 9 test that it has to meet. Prevents corrosion. It's a test that they've been doing for years, and they're just making the test more stringent for this new oil. And last but not least, there's sequence 10. It says that they have to have less timing chain wear, which is a big deal in these little bitty engines that put out a lot of horsepower. The engines are spinning faster and faster. Generally, they have at least 2 overhead cams, if not 4, that have variable valve timing. You do not want chain wear to wear out earlier. Now, when I was a young mechanic, the timing chains generally lasted as long as the engines did, unless you went 300,000 miles and it finally wore out. They were bigger, thicker chains. Check out this old Chevy timing chain. It's thick, it's strong. The new ones are tiny compared to these, so they need more more protection. Plus, they're also spinning faster. So really, why are they making this new specifications, GF6A and 6B? The oil has to evolve, just like it did in the past. Originally, cars used oil that would sludge up. Then they made detergent oil. But even then, most of the cars didn't even have oil filters to filter stuff out. We had a Ford, didn't have an oil filter on. It was a Ford Fairlane, had no oil filter. We would just change the oil in it every 1,000 miles. Then they added oil filters, started making various different viscosities for different usages. They're upping the ante again and making an oil that really is much higher quality than the old stuff was. And it's a real change for the better. I remember they started changing the oil change intervals. And I asked an engineer once, okay, we used to say to change it every 3,000. Now you're saying 5. What's the difference? Well, back then the engineer that I talked to said, well, Scotty, we have to make them more eco-friendly. So we're telling you to change the oil every 5,000 miles now. I said, well, did you change anything? He said, no, we didn't change anything at all, except the mileage we told you to change it at. Well, these modern oils, the GF6, they do have a lot of modifications to make them better, having better additives, making the base more pure so they have less wear. Because back when I was a young mechanic, you could rebuild an engine for $200-300 really. But today's modern engines, you'll go anywhere from $3,000 to $20,000 rebuilding some of those fancy quad overhead cam 24 valve. You don't want those engines to wear out prematurely, and coming up with this better type of oil is a good thing. And I suppose, like everything else, when it first comes out, they'll rip everyone off and charge way too much for the oil. But when you consider what an engine costs versus what the oil costs, you're going to be better using this oil than any of those modern engines with GDI, variable valve timing, turbochargers, small 4-cylinder engines that put out a lot of horsepower by revving faster. You want to use this new GF6B oil in those, the ones that require the 0W16 oil. And as I said, the stuff isn't out yet until May 1st, 2020. So somebody tries telling you they're selling you GF6 oil, they're full of crap. Don't buy it now. And in the future, when it is out, realize that the GF6B should only be used to call for the 0W16. If they don't, you can use the GF6A because that's backward compatible. Use whatever the manufacturers suggest. And let's say you have a car today that requires 0W16 oil. You definitely want to use it in those when the oil comes out and you can buy the stuff. So now you know a little bit about the history of engine oil and how this new GF6 oil is going to work in your modern car. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.